Okay, welcome to this week's edition of All in the Mishpacha, cover of this week's Mishpacha magazine. Rabbi Shimon Russell discovered his best self by parenting his struggling kids. Today I want to focus on actually the women's Mishpacha, family first. There was an interesting short letter that was written towards the end of the magazine. Dear Shadchan, I know how invested you are in getting my son married. I know you spent hours upon hours of thought, effort, and phone calls with hope that this girl will be the one. She goes on to say, the mother, she's an appreciative mother. The Shadchan, her son, obviously is an introverted guy. It's hard for him to meet girls, to keep going out. They reject him after a couple of dates. You're unlike other Shadchanim. You keep on sticking with my son. However, the last night I began to worry. You suggested that to help build emotional intimacy between dates, you begin texting the girl. That was your suggestion. You probably know better than anyone else that feeling an emotional click, quote unquote, is sometimes difficult with shidduch dating. Everything can match up on paper, hashkafos, a line, conversation flows, and yet an elusive something, quote unquote, is lacking. But when I was dating, no one really expected this click to be in place before marriage. That was the stuff of Hollywood. If he's a good guy, if you don't make a good father, husband, provider, then weiter. Maybe I'm outdated. Maybe I don't get the kids of this generation. Maybe the Gedolim that worked for us have evolved to match a new reality. Maybe Rabban even agree with this, that you consulted with Das Torah before dispensing your advice. Was this an emergency measure applied to my son's case only because he was an older single with weaker social skills? So enlighten me, because you encouraged my son to text the girl he's dating in order to build an emotional intimacy. I was at a loss. She continues, at a risk of sounding holier than thou, I do wonder, where does texting fit into the shidduch system hashkafically? Did you ever think about that? Sneus is a midah so valued in our circles. We're incredibly careful when keeping men and women separate because we know how much potential lies here. Right? Her son, who's obviously very knowledgeable with the ladies, if he didn't have the help of texting during his dating, would probably do bad things with women. I think he'd probably be a part of the incel community. These sensitivities are beautiful and necessary. Why suddenly, when a couple is dating, are those sensitivities not only ignored but trampled? The walls we erect are crumbling. Are you at ease with the fact that this may be due to your encouragement? I understand it's become increasingly common for many engaged couples to text each other. Isn't that walking into a sneeze minefield? You could blow up. I apologize if this sounds harsh. I worry for my child, and I care about his ruchnius. I care about his marriage also. I wanted to enter his new life with this call in the purest way possible. So, this is how she writes. But I'll give it to you, she concludes the letter. You were right again. The texting worked. They're getting engaged. Wow, seemingly that's amazing. Should be the end of the letter, but it's not. The last line, and I'm left wondering if it wasn't achieved all wrong. So her son, after many years in the Shidduchim Parsha, gets engaged, but with the help of something which is illegal in the Shidduch world, which is to text in between dates. The mother sounds like almost she's regretting that her son got engaged, if it comes at this cost. Now, I'm not a mother, I'm a father. But this letter is surprisingly shocking. If it would have ended without that last line, I would have said, fine, people say, it's not the best thing to text. We'll discuss in a second why it's such a terrible thing, or why people think it's such a terrible thing. She didn't follow all the rules, but her son got engaged. He's probably an older single, maybe in his 30s. It's probably very hard for him to get married. So he got married to a girl he probably likes and probably is more connected to emotionally because they've texted as well as meeting in person. But the mother is not happy because she lost her tznius. She lost her purity. Was it worth it to give it up for her son to get engaged? Now, the thing that bothers me so much about this article is that who says he can't text in the middle of the shidduch dating? The shidduch world, I think, is the most pronounced area in the Jewish frum world where we make up our own rules. there are no rules, especially in the Hasidic system. I think that's the way it used to be. Parents used to come and they used to say, "Oh, you're a nice family. You're a nice family. We're gonna get married. With our kids will get married. The kids barely know each other. They'll meet each other for half an hour. They're not gonna say no after 15, 20 minutes meeting the girl. Hello, what's your name? How many siblings do you have? What's the weather outside? You can't figure it out. Just check your smartwatch, because you might have it on your smartwatch." So that's the end of the dating, and they get married. But in the Litvish shidduch world, there's difference between America and Israel, and within America, Lakewood, of course, is unique because Lakewood's unique about everything. Lakewood's the best place to live in the world, holier than Yerushalayim. So, in America, you go out 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 times, 11, 12 times, 13 times, okay, whatever, you get engaged, but it has to be a certain amount of times. When you reveal information, you don't reveal the first 2, 3, 4. On the fourth one, maybe. Fifth one, probably you should. Sixth one, maybe it's too late. If you didn't reveal after that, the Rav will tell you to break it off because they didn't reveal the information earlier enough. The first date, you go to a lounge. Second date, you can do something not fun, but not a lounge. And the third date, you want to do something more fun to show the personality. So you go to arcade in America. You go to the zoo here in Israel. So in Israel, it's less time. You have 3, 4, 5, maybe 6 dates, 7 dates. And then really you gotta make a choice. So we have all these rules. We have rules the shadchanim rigorously usually follow. The best shadchanim out, the ones who made the best shidduchim with the best families. What you're allowed to talk to, what are you supposed to talk about on a date, what you're allowed to talk about, whatever. All these rules. If you're in the shidduch world, either as a parent or as a person, you know what I'm talking about, the Litvish shidduch world. So all of a sudden, this mother's upset because, according to most people, texting is not okay in the shidduch world because this mother feels it's a minefield. Her son might text his date instead of meeting at the lobby. Let's go to the hotel. Let's go upstairs. No, it's not gonna happen. They're so worried about these things. No, so the point is like, who's making these rules? And the people that are keeping these rules going are the Rabbanim, because these are the people that are getting asked for advice. And somehow this system came. I don't know when this system was introduced. Was it 20 years ago, 30 years ago? I don't know, 40 years ago. I don't know when this system was introduced. My parents are modern Orthodox. They met going out for bowling or something like that with other friends. It wasn't part of the shidduch world. So I don't have a history on the Haredi world 40 years ago, but I can imagine it's going on 40, 50, 60 years. I don't know. It's evolved to have even more rigorous rules. And the problem is these rules don't often make sense, and there's no basis for these rules because they're clearly not aligned to the Torah. The Torah doesn't talk about rules. When Eliezer went to find Rivka, the classical parsha of Shidduchim, how many dates Eliezer went on with Rivka. He didn't go out with Rivka. He just got Rivka and he picked her up, and he decided that she was for Yitzchak, a third person. So there's no rules for this in the Torah. Clearly not in the Shulchan Aruch, and clearly not in the Gemara. It doesn't talk about these things. And probably if you look at the sources, they probably don't indicate anything of these at all. But somehow, because the Rabbanim felt these things are necessary, and these are the takanas of our generation. So therefore, if you breach any one of these rules, you have committed the worst aveira in the entire world, to the point that the mother feels it would be better that her socially inept son should not get married, because it's a mitzvah baba avera. It's a mitzvah that came through an avera. Now, I want to talk about one more article that intrigued me in Mishpacha magazine this week. It's written the forum from Rav Chaim Aryeh Zev Ginsburg, from Darkest to Light. He's a rabbi in the Five Towns. I happen to know him personally because he was the rabbi of the shul when I used to live in Hillcrest, Queens. He had a shul there. Eventually, they acquired him for a shul in Cedarhurst, and they built a whole nice shul for him. And so I was younger when he left, maybe my teenage years. He's a pretty famous rabbi in the from Jewish world, especially America. He writes sometimes in Mishpacha magazine. He's not a regular columnist. Uh, he actually had a very difficult bout with COVID. He almost died. It was a miracle that he survived from COVID. People were asking him. He starts off. It has been both humbling and a bit stressful when people have approached me over the last few months asking why I haven't written any articles in quite a while. Truthfully, it wasn't about a writer's block, but rather something much more difficult. The topic that I want to, or rather need to write about, is challenging and distressing. Challenging is that it is very difficult to be perceived as being a katrig on Yidden, and even more so distressing in that the message never seems to resonate with those who need it the most. But the words I'm writing come straight from my heart, and with Hashem's help, will enter into the heart of at least one of the column's readers. He writes for, I don't know, good 3 pages over here about the idea of sinas chinam. He thought Mashiach was coming on Tisha B'Av. He thought Mashiach was coming on Sukkot. But no, he said, how could it be? We have so many unbelievable organizations. How could there be sinas chinam in Klal Yisrael? As he says, how is that possible? It just doesn't make any sense. How can a nation that counts organizations like Atzala, Bigur Cholim, Owel, Chai Lifeline, Boni Olam, Owel Sarala, it's his own initiative, Misaskim, Chaverim, Shomrim, etc., in its ranks, can be accused of sinas chinam? It seems impossible to comprehend on any level, maybe even libelous. It's true, he says, that we still have a long way to go. As long as there are Yidden, in parentheses, albeit a very small, misguided minority with lofty intentions, who feels okay to call Nazis Yidden, all other Yidden Nazis. He's talking about certain sects of Jews here in Israel, who can throw rocks at women and children, or happen to be sitting on a bus that passes the street that decided it should be the front line of a protest against whomever and whatever. Yidden who can enter into a rival's factions and base matters on Shabbos Kodesh with mob-like frenzy and intimidate other Yidden who just happen to be in their orbit. Yidden who hide behind others and prey upon the financial plights of other Yidden, forcing them into foreclosure or collecting exorbitantly high interest fees on their loans. Then we haven't yet reached where we're struggling to be, or supposed to be. He says it can't be just because of these people, the Satmar people, who are the AIDS people here in Yerushalayim that, have these crazy protests and, about the light rail and things like that. It's a small percentage. And then he relents. Maybe it's possible because of a small people. At the end, he really decides that, these are all communal things. He's right about, these organizations. But on a personal level, he brings a story from Gittin, where it talks about Kamsa Bar Kamsa, where it was just on an individual level. He embarrassed, I guess it was Bar Kamsa, by not letting him into the party. He even wrote about a friend who had a similar story of Bar Kamsa, which is very interesting. I'm not among the crowd of the rich and from that occupies Lakewood and part of Flatbush, and maybe in the Five Towns, obviously, who go to these hotels for Sukkot. It's a very interesting story. He says, one morning of Chol Hamoed, I davened Nates in the Groshel in Shari Chesed, where I met an acquaintance. He came over to me looking visibly upset, and he said, just because someone is wealthy and gives lots of tzedakah and is highly recognized for all his charitable events doesn't make him a mensch. Leaving me no opportunity to respond, I quickly elaborated. He been invited to a friend of his, let's call him Reuven, to join him at a private, very upscale Simchas Beis HaShoeva. So, in the non-Jewish world, they do upscale parties. From when we do upscale Simchas Beis HaShoevas, held at one of the hotels in Yerushalayim the day before. It was to be an evening of entertainment. Meaningful people, podcasts, great food, sushi, and drinks. I didn't say sushi. And drinks, Coca-Cola, Glenlivet. And the admission was by invitation only. Reuven, who was on the guest list, invited my acquaintance, who called Shimon, to come along as well. When they arrived, the host opened the door of the suite and told Shimon that the party was by invitation only. He then invited Reuven in and asked Shimon to leave. Reuven turned to him and apologized. I'm sorry. I thought I could bring a friend along, he said. I'll see you tomorrow. And with that, he entered the suite and closed the door behind him, leaving Shimon on the other side. It was cold. He had to go upon the roof like Hillel HaZaken and in the snow peer inside the Simple Beis HaShoeva party. You know what he did? He had Moser Nefesh to see what the party was. I'm joking. Now, the next morning when I met Shimon, so the person he met was Shimon, the person who was not allowed admission into the party. He shared with me how hurt and embarrassed he had felt. He said he was so disturbed He'd been up all night and was looking to me for some confirmation that his behavior was totally unacceptable. I immediately thought of the story of Kamsa and Bar Kamsa. He writes, it's entirely possible that a private encounter between two people where one Yid is so indifferent to another Jew's feelings, in the middle of Simchas Yom Tov, in the holy city of Yerushalayim, has the ability to put the brakes on the journey to the Gula. My thoughts are that just maybe we're on track in our caring and doing for others in the public sphere, where we exhibit such incredible avas chinam. However, perhaps it's in the interpersonal relationships between two Yidden, either publicly or privately, where we still need work. Just maybe in this area, even one kamsa type of encounter can set the clock back another month, another year, chas v'shalom, even another Shemitah cycle. So that's basically the gist of what he writes over here. And he says, gives another story here about a chotin who didn't want to wrote off a shidduch because they had a bad experience with the boy's mother when they were in kindergarten, something like that. Really, like a story like that. She felt uncomfortable because of the kindergarten or grade school, so she ruined the shidduch for like 4 years. So he's distinguishing between the public sphere and the private sphere. In the private sphere, there's a lot of machlokas. Now, if you're someone who I'm gonna say it straight, if you're in a normal marriage with a woman, and you both have materialistic desires, and you live on the same plane, and you can relate to each other on the same plane, you will realize that not just between man and his friend, Reuben and Shimon going to a party, you will realize that in your own house with your own wife, you will get into many disagreements. And most cases, you'll get into a lot of fights. And people will raise their voices and yell at each other. This is very, very normal. In fact, if you are in a marriage where this is not normal, or this is not common, and I've heard from different rabbis, I'm sure there's other people like this maybe, I'll discuss in a second, that, sorry for the background of a baby, don't let the baby hear that's crying. It's very possible, it's for sure that there's going to be arguments and disagreements, and if you're in a household where you don't have disagreements, like I've heard Rosh Hashanah Auerbach never had to apologize to his wife, there's something missing. And of course, there's sinas chinam in this generation. There's sinas chinam. Now, I'm not going to say every marriage is sinas chinam, but I'm going to say that when it comes to different sects of Jews, between the Litvish, the Haredi Jews, and the Chardal Jews, even. I set up a shidduch I tried to set up a shidduch once. I have a brother-in-law that's a brother, even older. He was almost 40 years old, and he was looking for a shidduch. And I met a person who told me about this great girl, but she was Chardal. Now, in Israeli politics, Chardal is combining with the Haredi party. So this was a couple of years ago. I figured, give it a shot. So I called up the girl who was Chardal. I'm not a shot. I'm shotgun. I don't know why. I should be a good shotgun, but I wasn't. It was my first time acting as a shotgun. I called up the girl. I had to talk with her for an hour, but I finally convinced her, give it a shot with the Haredi guy. He's a Haredi guy. He's a good guy. You're Chardal. Chardal is basically Haredi Dati Leumi, somewhere in between. Maybe you subscribe to YU Shitas or things like that, but you're the religious from aspect of Yeshiva University. She decided to give it a try. I called up. That was on Friday. I called up Motzei Shabbos. I called up the boy, who was the brother of my brother-in-law, and he shut me down right away. He didn't even give me a chance. Okay. One day I told him that she was, even though I told her she was gorgeous, that's why I thought it would work, because she's gorgeous. And I thought, he's a human being. She's gorgeous, but nonetheless, I didn't see her. This is what I was told about her. So he shut it down. He says, people who say Hallel on Yom HaAtzmaut, now Chardal, if they say Hallel, they don't say it with a bracha, so they're definitely not violating halacha. He said, Chardal people who say Hallel, it's a violation of Rashi and Shabbos Kuf Yutet. He knew the exact Gemara over there, and he said the Gemara compares it to tying someone. If you get involved with people like that, the people who say Hallel Shelo Bizmano, right? Hallel, now when it's not the right time, it's arguable whether Yom HaTzmaut is the right time for a Hallel, then they are considered to be someone who you should tie them in front of a lion and let the lion trample on them. This is what he thought about a Chardal person. Now, it's enough to say you don't want to go out with her, okay? To say that he views that this person should be trampled by a lion because of his interpretation of Rashi in Masechah Shabbos, Now, I looked up the Rashi in Masechah Shabbos. It's not exactly what he says, and it doesn't mention anything about tying someone in front of a lion. But he took this Gemara way out of context, and he used it as the basis why he shouldn't go out with this girl. And obviously, there's a big sinas chinam between Haredi people and even Chardal people, and certainly modern Orthodox people. And I think it goes a lot of times. It goes in both directions, And you have Haredi against the Hasidim, and you have the Hasidim against different sects of Hasidim. Even in one sect of Hasidim, you know how many breakoffs there are among different branches of Hasidus? Every Ger was the last Hasidus that didn't have a breakoff until a couple years ago. It finally had a breakoff. Every Hasidus has multiple rabbis. After the father dies, there's fights and infights. Who should be the next leader? And that results in different branches of Hasidus. You think they're all being nice to each other. No. These are fights. These is machlokes. There's machlokes and sinas chinam rife in Klal Yisrael. This is not, to assume that this rabbi assumes that because we have chesed organizations, a lot of chesed organizations that help on the communal level, so therefore interpersonally everything's okay also. And he admits it, and maybe it's not. Maybe it's not. What do you mean? Yeah, a normal marriage with your wife, you realize that there's fights and this people, they're spending time where they're next to each other, they're going to see each other's negative qualities. That's the way human beings are, and they get into fights. So to say there's no sin in Klal Yisrael, the point of bringing this article and connecting it to the first article I read is, I believe there's a connection. And the connection is that the people making these rules, as I mentioned in the first article, about all these rules in Shidduchim, you have to have all these rules when you go out, what to say, what you can't say, not allowed to text. These are made primarily by the Rabbanim of the generation. I believe the Rabbanim of this generation have lost touch with the generation. They've completely lost touch, and I think it centers around the internet and phones that obviously you can't go on if you're a normal person, you have a normal life. Even if you're not a businessman, you can't go on without the internet, without the phone, and by shutting it down and ignoring it, without even looking at it into it halachically, whether maybe it could be permissible, even to see a woman in an advertisement. It's not so clear to see a woman advertisement that's not dressed properly. That's a problem. So when you're doing that, and then you just shut it down. And here in Israel, like they riot stores that sell smartphones, and they're upon them. You see posters all over Jerusalem saying that people who have the internet, even the internet in their house, not just on a phone, they're going to Gehenna, and it's Yarg Val Yavor. It really, people say it's Yarg Val Yavor. Really, little Rabbanim say this. They've lost They've lost a connection to the generation, the compass of the generation. And because of that, rabbis, Ginsburg, he's a rabbi. And another rabbi wrote another article, there's another rabbi who wrote something over here. He says that we're not supposed to know about the lives of our rebbeim, our Rosh Yeshivas. We admire them from a distance, but we don't need to know about the nitty-gritty of their lives because of a mora or a kavod for the rabbi. No, I don't think you have to have more kavod for God. Maybe a kavod for your Rebbe Muvhak, but every Rebbe, you shouldn't know about their personal lives. I know stories because when I was younger, I was very close to a lot of Rabbanim, a lot of Rosh Yeshivas. I was in their houses when I wasn't married, and I saw the relationships with the husband and wife. I'm like, wow, these are so holy, these rabbis. They barely even talk to their wives, and there's such chesed over there, there's such understanding over there. They're most nefesh for each other. And with the stories they were telling me that, they're going to America and their wives are crying for weeks at a time, or their wives are afraid to talk to them, or the wives have that look of, that they're lost on their faces, and it haunts me. I realized back in these rabbis, the reason they lost touch with the generation is because they lost touch with their wives, with their marriage. A lot of rabbis, I'm not saying all rabbis, but I think the nature of a rabbi, and this gets back into the column of growth curve, which I've talked about multiple times, about the two different learner husbands. There's a learner husband that's very serious and learned, and there's another one where he's inviting Bachram over to his houses for these elaborate meals on Shabbos and goes into debt and can't pay his rent in Ramat Eshkol, and realizes his mistake, that he's ignoring his wife and his kids. And a lot of times when you're a rabbi of a yeshiva, of a shul, right? A woman wrote in over here. She knows firsthand. She's a wife. She won't see her husband 2 hours after davening ends on Shabbos on Friday evening, on Motzei Shabbos. Most of the time, Pesach and Sukkot, he's not there. He's answering shilas. He's busy dealing with the community. maybe she signed up for it, but I doubt she is happy with the situation when she finds out what it really is. And the reason that these relationships go on with these rabbis is because the rabbis, they get married, and their their interests, most rabbanim, because I was on the path of being that, is their interest is in a spiritual pursuit. It's in the Gemara, in the spirituality. So they're connecting when they're connecting with their wife, and obviously when you connect with their wife, most of the relationship is a physical, gashmistic relationship. I'm not just talking about the bedroom. I'm talking about your whole life. You sit down for dinner, you have to deal with the kids, you have to deal with finances. So all these things that you have to deal with, a lot of times the rabbis are not involved. The husbands are not involved in these things, and even if they're involved, they're not even there. They're just doing it to appear normal, and their head is always in the sefer. They're always thinking and learning, even in the house probably. And when they go, they're thinking about the next time they can go give a shiur or go back to learn. Um, so they're not connecting on a materialistic level, and the women are not on a spiritual level. No woman is like that. Their head is in this world. Women think about the materialism. So when you're not connected with your wife because you're thinking about spirituality and she's thinking about materialism, and you have these, marriages that, you never get into arguments. The reason you never get into arguments is because nothing materialistic matters to you, right? I've seen a lot of people, they write when a person gets married, a husband and wife get married, the decisions of spirituality should be made by the husband, and the wife should make all decisions about the materialism in the marriage. I'm like, what? The husband has no opinion. He doesn't care about the materialism. He doesn't care what he eats for dinner. He doesn't care what clothes he wears. He doesn't care about what they do for the children. He doesn't care what vacations he goes on. He doesn't care about, the car he drives. He doesn't care about these things. They say, no, what do you mean? This is Gashmias, right? You should run away, America, the Gashmias, But the problem is, right, even if you want to dedicate your life to spirituality, we believe you're supposed to get married. It's socially unacceptable not to get married, at this point at least. So you have to connect with your wife, and your wife is rooted in materialism. Women are rooted in materialism. They're dealing with food and kids and laundry all day. So that's their whole life. So if you don't have an opinion about their clothing, and maybe you should have an opinion about your clothing, you're not going to be able to connect with them. And the connection will be, you'll give in to whatever they want in the materialism because you don't care about the materialism. And you'll try to get your way in spirituality, and that'll be the pshara. That'll be but you're not connecting with your wife. And that's the opportunity that a husband has to connect to this world. The best opportunity is through a wife. If you're getting married, one of the reasons you get married is to be able to connect to the physicality of this world. Because women are so much better at the physicality than men. Even if you try to focus on the physicality, a regular person, you always get beaten by your wife. They make quicker decisions. They know more about it. They know more about beauty in this world than you do. So you have to work really hard to get to the level. But if you're not even trying, if you just turn it off and just go after the spirituality, you'll never have a connection with that, and you lose your connection. You lose touch with physicality and ultimately with generation, because the generation, people that are not rabban, people that work during the day, or important and have, gashmistic things, materialistic things matter to these people, so they just make these rules that don't make any sense. No texting. Why no texting? Because it might lead to something terrible. Yeah, but what about the positives of texting? It helps someone make a shidduch over here. There's people who are involved in the day-to-day relationship with people and realize that there's a tons of sinas chinim going around here. Those are the people that are going to be able to bring us out of sinas chinim, to realize what the machlokas are. What are we fighting about? What are people normally like? People are fighting for reasons. They want money. They want honor. They want these things. So you have to be in touch with these things. And if you're not in touch with these things, then there's no way that you can make rules for these other people. And that's why this generation, no one's listening to the rules anymore. They're abundant. There's a great chasm between Rabbanim and what the generation actually does. I know even in Lakewood, where maybe the biggest yeshiva in the world, the most famous yeshiva in the world, BMG. I spoke to my cousin, my wife's cousin from BMG. He's learning in Kol. He says, "What do you mean? Lakewood is full of people with smartphones. And I mean, without filters. What do you think? Do you think everyone in Lakewood has a filter on their phone? No, most people don't have a filter on their phone, which would be horrific if you ask. But nonetheless, these same people, they still ask all their shilas to Das Torah, and they still only read Mishpacha magazine, which is reviewed by Das Torah. So, on the one hand, like I mentioned last week, we're trying to we feel guilty that we're not listening to Das Torah, but at the same time, we realize we can't listen to Das Torah because it doesn't make any sense anymore. And you have to be involved with materialism to be able to make decisions for this generation. You can't make decisions for this generation if you're not in touch with the materialistic side of this generation And if you think that there's no sinas chinam in the world now, you've lost touch with interpersonal relationships, regular relationships. You have no advice to your marriage because there's nothing to fight about because you're in different worlds. You got to get into this world, and I think the leaders of this generation, I think, are going to be on social media platforms like this, where people realize this generation, recognize its challenges, and don't just ignore things that are necessary, like phones, and internet. You need to use these things and find the best way. The challenges that we find. So there are ways of dealing with it. I don't think filters is the right way. There's other ways of dealing with it, but the point is that a lot of the Rabbanim have lost their connection to the physical world. I don't think it's just in this generation, but I think in this generation people are weak and they're always looking for Das Torah. There's never been a generation where more people are saying you have to ask Das Torah. Nonetheless, on the other side, they don't even care what Das Torah says. They always say Das Torah, but most people don't care what Das Torah says because people feel guilty. They realize it doesn't make any sense, Das Torah. They're not connected to this world. But at the other hand, they feel guilty and they want to make everything kosher, everything meaningful, everything, making the songs closer to Hashem. So we're at a crossroads now in the Jewish world, and I think these two articles really highlight that these laws are out of touch. These rules, like I mentioned last week, are Baal Tosef, are additions that are not found in the Torah, and the rules don't make sense, and they're not in touch with the generation. I think as a generation, we have to realize that and take the next step and let entertainment reign. It's okay to be entertained, even if it's not meaningful or it's not kosher. I mean, not kosher. It shouldn't be averos, but kosher doesn't have to be from. Kosher shouldn't mean from. It should be what the halacha says is kosher. And as far as I'm concerned, the only time the Torah uses the word kosher is when it comes to food, not when it comes to your entertainment. That's what I like to say about this week's Mishpacha magazine. Hope you enjoyed. See you in the next one.